So here in Paris, we've agreed that we must go further now to support the peace process, support Ukraine, and increase the pressure on Russia to get serious.
We are going to continue to support the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian army. This is something that is indispensable to make sure that we can prepare for peace. It is a necessity to make sure that we can counter Russia's plan, aka pretend to negotiate, to pull the rug from under their enemies' feet, which is exactly what's happening. On top of the 2 billion euros of bilateral support that was announced yesterday in conjunction with President Zelenskyy and as part of our additional support to Ukraine and its army. Support in the form of drone satellites and co-production in Ukraine have been identified, as well as a number of training programs for the Ukrainian army.
Leaders from nearly 30 countries gathered in Paris for a major Ukraine summit on March 27th, focusing on military aid and future peace talks. The summit, called the Coalition of the Willing, reflected European concerns over declining U.S. support for Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stressed the need for security guarantees to ensure Ukraine's long-term defense and stability. Leaders from Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and Turkey joined top EU and NATO officials for the discussions. France pledged 2 billion euros in military aid as 30 leaders discussed strengthening Ukraine's negotiation power. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer backed Ukraine, rejected lifting sanctions on Russia, and discussed new military strategies. He expressed the support of the Coalition of the Willing for Ukraine to make sure Ukraine is in the strongest possible position, both now and in further negotiations. The talks were aimed to secure Europe's role in shaping a peace deal and maintaining pressure on Russia. This is the third such summit since the U.S. shifted its Ukraine policy and began direct talks with Russia.
Then this week, we saw the agreement on a ceasefire in the Black Sea. I welcomed this as a vital first step forward. But within a few minutes of the announcement, Russia set out new conditions and delays. Now, President Trump has rightly called them out for dragging their feet. And we agreed here in Paris today that it's clear the Russians are filibustering. They are playing games and they're playing for time. It is a classic from the Putin playbook. But we can't let them drag this out while they continue prosecuting their illegal invasion. Instead, we should be setting a framework and a deadline of delivering real progress. And then we should hold them to that deadline. So here in Paris, we've agreed that we must go further now to support the peace process, support Ukraine, and increase the pressure on Russia to get serious. That means, first, stepping up the military pressure. So the Defense Secretary will chair the next Ukraine Defense Contact Group on the 11th of April to marshal more military aid and keep Ukraine in the fight. Because peace comes through strength. That was one of the main messages reasserted today and emphasized today all around the table and the meeting. Second, it means increasing the economic pressure on Russia, accelerating new, tougher sanctions, bearing down on Russia's energy revenues, and working together to make this pressure count. We also discussed how we can support the implementation of a full or partial ceasefire when it is in place, and how we can build on efforts towards negotiations on a just and lasting peace. That remains our shared goal, and it's what the Coalition of the Willing is designed to support. The political will from partners here today was clear. And this week in London, we hosted over 200 military planners from 30 countries, coming forward with contributions on everything from logistics and command and control to deployments on land, on air, and on sea. That work continues at pace. We will be ready to operationalize a peace deal whenever its precise shape turns out to be. And we will work together to ensure Ukraine's security so it can defend and deter against future attacks. This is Europe mobilizing together behind the peace process on a scale that we haven't seen for decades. Backed by partners from around the world, we are determined to deliver a just and lasting peace, because we know that it is vital for Ukraine and Europe as a whole. And I am clear that it's also vital for Britain.
Negotiations have started. I will get back to this, and they are welcome. And I would like to commend both the leadership of President Trump, with whom I was in permanent contact over the past weeks, as well as the courage of President Zelenskyy, with whom, as it is widely known, I am in close and personal connections. Now, our objective is very clear. We need to win peace. Consequently, we need to make sure that Ukraine is in the best possible position in those negotiations, and we need to make sure that the peace that will be negotiated will be robust and lasting for all Europeans. This is the reason why this today's meeting took place as a follow-up to the initiative launched in Paris on the 17th of February, also in line with the discussion that was undertaken in London a few weeks later. Today, this meeting took place with 31st countries, with the Secretary General of NATO, as well as EU institutions. The 31 countries make up a coalition of action for a robust and lasting peace. Based on our willingness, our commitment, and everyone's determination, we have first started by expressing a common view. First, our willingness to remain united and to do everything that we can to build this peace by force, to repeat Trump's words. We also enacted the fact that Ukraine, a couple of days ago in Jeddah, had the courage to say yes to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. Ever since this decision was announced, no Russian response was given. New preconditions were set up for partial ceasefires, for hypothetical ceasefires, and yet every day new strikes took place, and increasing strikes took place. So in this context, we would like to commend the US's effort for peace, to exchange with the United States of America, to prolong our determination and our plan. But we are also determined to make sure that we overlook no discourse from Russia, as was evidenced by Riyadh's discussions on the issue of the Black Sea. And Russia, through its discourses, speeches, has completely remade and reinvented what has happened over the past couple of years. Now, we are all in agreement. It's quite difficult to argue that negotiations for peace will take place, since three communiques have been drafted, one which was from the US and Ukraine, and one from the US and Moscow, and another one from Russia, and all of them diverge. This fosters a lot of lack of certainty. Therefore, we have come up with one message. Number one, we are going to continue to support the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian army. This is something that is indispensable to make sure that we can prepare for peace. It is a necessity to make sure that we can counter Russia's plan, aka pretend to negotiate, to pull the rug from under their enemies' feet, which is exactly what's happening. Based on this, our Ukrainian partners identified a number of priorities in artillery, in munitions, or ground air defense. They have been announced by some colleagues. They have also asked for the mobilization of a number of resources. Sweden, Norway, Germany, and others were part of the announcement of additional efforts. On top of the 2 billion euros of bilateral support that was announced yesterday in conjunction with President Zelenskyy and as part of our additional support to Ukraine and its army. Support in the form of drone satellites and co-production in Ukraine have been identified, as well as a number of training programs for the Ukrainian army. This has been discussed, and we have reached unanimity. We have also decided to accelerate the disbursement of funds under the auspices of the ERA program in the form of loans as well as a number of artillery. The EU, of which President I would like to thank, has made this announcement. When it comes to additional support to Ukraine, we have also unanimously supported and enacted the fact that the time for lifting sanctions had not come. No sanctions should be lifted unless peace has been established for good. We will continue exerting pressure from an economic viewpoint on the shadow fleets, and we will continue mobilization.